So, have you ever been told you need to fast before a blood test? I mean, of course you have, and you probably just nod and do it. But that one simple instruction is actually the first clue that there is a lot more going on behind the scenes than you might think. Okay, so here's the key thing you've got to understand. Your lab report isn't some fixed, absolute truth. Think of it more like a super sensitive snapshot of your body's incredibly complex chemistry, captured at one specific moment. And that snapshot, well, it can be influenced by an unbelievable number of things. To really get this, we need to follow the entire journey your sample takes. And this journey has three distinct phases. As we're about to see, there are, well, a few places where things can get a little tricky. First up, you've got the pre-analytical phase. This is literally everything that happens before the actual test, like how the sample is collected and transported. Then comes the analytical phase. That's when the fancy lab machines do their thing. And finally, the post-analytical phase, which is all about reporting and interpreting the results. Seems simple enough, right? Well, not exactly. Now, here's a number that might just blow your mind. 70%. Just take a second and think about what that could mean when it comes to lab tests. Is it the accuracy rate? Maybe the number of tests done right? Let's find out. It turns out up to 70% of all lab errors happen in that very first stage, the pre-analytical one. That is staggering. It means most of the problems happen before your sample even gets close to a sophisticated piece of lab equipment. So what are these pre-test factors we're talking about? Well, let's start with the ones you can actually control. This is where you can become a real partner in making sure your own results are as accurate as possible. Get a load of this. This is a perfect example of how sensitive these tests are. The simple act of going from lying down to standing up can cause your blood plasma volume to drop by about 10%. Fluid literally shifts into your tissues, and the proteins left behind in your blood get more concentrated. This can potentially throw off your results by up to 10%, all from just standing up. And this brings us right back to our first question about fasting. Eating a meal, especially a fatty one, can cause a huge but temporary spike in things like triglycerides and glucose. See, that isn't your normal baseline state. It's your just ate state. So fasting is absolutely crucial for getting a true picture of what's going on. What about hitting the gym before a test? Well, strenuous exercise causes all kinds of fluid shifts and hormonal changes. This can temporarily boost levels of things like creatinine, which is a marker for kidney function but also related to muscle, and phosphate. Your body is just doing what it's supposed to do after a workout, but it totally changes the picture your lab results paint. And believe me, the list goes on and on. The time of day you get the test matters because of our body's natural daily rhythms. Traveling across time zones, that can throw key hormones completely out of whack for days. Even things like smoking or drinking alcohol can have immediate, measurable effects on everything from your glucose to your liver enzymes. Okay, but beyond the things you can control, there are these deep, unchangeable factors that also define your personal baseline. We're talking about your body's unique blueprint. Age is a huge one. I mean, a newborn has ridiculously high levels of certain enzymes and hemoglobin. Then, during childhood, an enzyme called alkaline phosphatase, or ALP, spikes. That's because it's tied to bone growth. Things finally level out in adulthood, and then as we get older, natural shifts happen again in kidney function and hormone levels. Normal is really a moving target your whole life. And after puberty, biological sex creates completely different normal ranges. Men generally have higher levels of muscle-related enzymes like CK and AST, and that's just because of greater average muscle mass. Women, on the other hand, often have lower iron stores because of menstruation. These are just fundamental physiological differences, and they show up in the data. You see, it's all about context. Your ancestry can influence protein levels and enzyme activity. Where you live matters too. People at high altitudes naturally have more hemoglobin to carry oxygen. And something like pregnancy creates a whole new temporary physiological state, changing pretty much every single metric. So we've looked at all these variables, from your morning coffee all the way to your genetic makeup. But why does all this precision matter so much? Well, it all comes down to the real-world clinical impact. Okay, I've got one last powerful number for you, 80 to 90%. What role do you think lab tests really play in a doctor's decision-making process? This number has the answer. This is what is at stake. An estimated 80 to 90% of all clinical decisions depend on those lab results. Just let that sink in for a second. Nearly every major decision about your health, from what's wrong with you to what medicine you should take, is guided by the information in that report. One of our sources puts it perfectly. The true measure of a lab isn't how many tests it runs, it's how reliable its results are. And that reliability, it depends on controlling for all those variables we just talked about, many of which happen long before a sample ever even makes it to the lab.
So, in the end, a lab report is so much more than a set of numbers. It's a story, told in the language of biochemistry. It's a story about your life, your habits, your unique body, at one single moment in time. The real question is, now that you know what goes into it, do you know what story yours is telling?